Thank you.
And with me on the program now, Labor frontbencher Jason Clare, the member for Blaxland as well in Western Sydney. Jason Clare, this is a lot of money. I put the same question to Ed Husick. I want to get your thoughts on this now. For jobs, tens of thousands of jobs once the airport's built. It's a lot of money being spent on infrastructure for your area. How do you respond? Does this ease your concerns at all?
Sure. Well, I support the development of a second airport for Sydney, but I do think it's important that a rail line is built to the airport, not just road links. I think it is important that there is a curfew for this airport, just like for Sydney Airport, and it's important that we develop a real jobs plan here, not just jobs building the roads and building the airport. But what I'm talking about here are long-term jobs, high-skilled, high-paid jobs in business parks and tech parks that surround this airport.
So it sounds like you differ with Ed Husick on this. Ed is worried about the money that's been allocated. He doesn't think it's sufficient. He thinks the estimates are being over-egged in terms of the job creation as well. It sounds like you're more in line with the view of Anthony Albanese, the transport spokesman for Labor, who's given in principle support to this announcement.
Kieran, all MPs in Western Sydney, whether they're Labor or Liberal, all agree that there should be a curfew if an airport is built in Western Sydney. It's an old saying, but it's true. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, and if it's good enough for the eastern suburbs to have a curfew, then it's good enough for the western suburbs to have a curfew as well. Infrastructure is expensive, and if you listen to what Jamie said talking about freight, then there is the prospect potentially of needing to build a freight line into the airport as well, and an intermodal facility, so the cost of infrastructure could get more and more expensive over time.
But overall, you like the idea of this job creating, productivity enhancing initiative, as the government argues it will be?
Oh, look, definitely airports act as a magnet for jobs, but in Western Sydney we've got more people than jobs. There's 200,000 people who have to leave Western Sydney every day to get a job. You know, we're sometimes called squinters because we're sitting on the M2 and the M4 and the M5, driving into the sun in the morning and driving into the sun in the afternoon. The argument I'd make is that an airport in and of itself is not enough to create the jobs we need in Western Sydney. And I'd ask the government, in a spirit of bipartisanship, to look at master planning this site. So it's not just jobs building the airport or operating the airport, but that we master plan this airport to create tech parks, industry parks. Here's an idea. Get the University of Western Sydney involved in this as well. They might set up a campus there and make sure that we're creating the jobs we need in Western Sydney for the decades to come.
Your colleague Michelle Rowland, again a Labor Western Sydney MP, has called for jobs to be guaranteed for Western Sydney graduates. Is that realistic? Can a government do that? Surely it's up to the contractors, those building it, delivering the infrastructure, to decide who and how they employ.
Well, I guess what I would say is create the job opportunities, and I think it'll be Western Sydney University graduates, as well as the people of Western Sydney generally, who will get the jobs in that area. They're the ones who live down the road, or who will live down the road as the growth centres are built. And at the moment, they're the ones who are having to travel an hour and a half sometimes to get here into the CBD for a job. We want to make sure that people are travelling north or south or staying in their own backyard rather than having to make the big hike into Sydney. And if we get this right, if the government gets this right and builds more than just an airport and more than just roads, we can create more jobs for the people we represent.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister said in terms of the curfew, when asked about it, that it's a very few people that would be affected given the flight plan and trajectories in Western Sydney at Badgerys Creek, vis-a-vis the situation at Kingsford Smith. I think the number was 4,000 as opposed to 130,000 people that could be affected by aircraft noise. What do you say to that when the government puts that point in response to suggestions there needs to be a curfew in the second airport in Badgerys?
Kieran, it's just a question of fairness. If we've got a curfew in the eastern suburbs or the North Shore, there should also be a curfew in the western suburbs as well. Tony Abbott made the same point in the press conference. Isn't it about viability as well? If it's going to make the airport not viable in terms of the spillover from the
Kingsford Smith. Why is that such a deal breaker in your view?
Kieran, let's be very clear about this. It's not a question of viability. The Prime Minister himself in the same press conference said that most people don't want to fly at night. This will be principally a domestic airport, at least in the early stages, and most of us want to fly during the day. Most of the flights will be during the day, and I tell you what, most of us, when we wake up, would rather get woken up by an alarm clock than by a 747. You made the same point in an interview just a few moments ago, that it's a fair enough point that if there's a curfew in the east, there should be a curfew in the west. And I'd say to Tony Abbott, make this decision now before the people of Western Sydney force you to make this decision.
Jason, Clare, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for that.
Good on you. Thanks, Kieran.
We're out of time.